Good evening, everybody. Lovely to see you again. Welcome to the RAF Club virtual events. Tonight, I know, because I'm a real fan, we've got a real treat. We've got Dr. Ruth Briant-Jones, who has health in your hands, which, looking at the photograph you've got in front of me, I obviously need it because I look really tired and old. So there we go. I've worked for the last couple of months with Ruth, and she's quite frankly a real thought leader in health. She did a sports science degree, became an Air Force officer, training officer, and then decided to go into her passion, which was medicine. So became a doctor. So she's been one of the national health heroes dealing with COVID over the last 18 months or so. She's got qualifications in nutrition, obviously the sport, the medicine. So if you have any questions on health tonight, she is the person to ask. She gives it as it is, gives you the biology or physiology of how and why our bodies work and how sometimes they maybe work against us. So if you have any questions, please do use the chat facility or the question and answer facility. I will look at those questions and try and have as many as we can. We'll aim to finish about 7:15. So without further ado, I will hand over to Ruth. Good evening.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see where we're at. Yes, John has done a nice introduction there. Just as a little caveat on that, please don't start sending me photos of rashes that you want identified or whatever else. My family do enough of that already. Okay, so this evening, I'm going to try and cram into quite a short amount of time some pretty broad information about an area of medicine that I am very passionate about, called lifestyle medicine. And it's a relatively new area of medicine. It's what we call an emerging specialty. And it's developed as a result of essentially a lot of issues with rising levels of chronic disease and issues with mental health as well. And so we are finding out that we need to do more essentially with lifestyle. And that comes down to what each and every one of us do day in, day out, unfortunately, in some cases. So the scope for today, we're going to talk a little bit about lifestyle medicine and what that means. We're going to talk a little bit about our health, so where we're at, what the evidence looks at in terms of how healthy we are, what behaviours most of us are adopting that are good or not so good. And then finally, once we've figured out we're doing everything wrong, we're going to talk about how we do something about that, so how we change. And there will hopefully be some time at the end for Q&A. John knows from having worked with me, it's more than a couple of months actually, John, that I tend to over talk. So if I do, then John, just give me a prod, okay? So here we go. Lifestyle medicine. So lifestyle medicine, as I said, it's looking to try and help the issues that we know we have with rising levels of chronic disease. And by that we mean non-communicable disease. So that's not infections and things like that. It's more to do with things like diabetes and heart disease, strokes, and other conditions as well that are very much influenced by our lifestyle. And when lifestyle medicine was devised, it was essentially thought about in terms of what are the key things that we do day in, day out that have an impact on our health? Where is the evidence pointing us towards in terms of what can we do to make a difference and what is having an impact on our health long term? And as a result of that work, lifestyle medicine came up with 5 key areas that you'll see there in front of you on your screen. And there might be a couple of those that seem very obvious, and we talk about those with New Year's resolutions. And you know, whenever we think about getting healthier, most people will say, oh, I need to go on a diet, or I need to go to the gym a bit more, I need to get out and do a bit more exercise. So the first 2 are fairly obvious. We'll talk about nutrition and exercise. The others may be less so. So you can see the others there. Sleep. We know sleep is incredibly important in terms of allowing us to recharge, store memories, and do all the other good stuff that our body needs to do. We also know that the quality of sleep generally across most people is quite poor. And we think that is to do with essentially the way that we live our lives under bright lights at home and with screens and activities that stimulate us more than our ancestors, so that we are just generally a little bit more go, go, go in our heads, which affects our ability to sleep well. And the other two things there, you can see connection. So this is about how we have relationships with other people and the importance of having quality relationships with other people to help us stay well. And we know that this is an issue because we now have something in primary care, so in GP sort of circles, something called social prescribing, which has identified that many people, particularly older people, are lonely, particularly if they've lost their spouse, or they've divorced, or they've just ended up living alone in later life. We're finding that people with poor connection to the outside world and to other people are becoming more and more unwell. So social prescribing was put into place to try and help with that. And the way that works is if you go to the docs and say, I'm feeling a bit crap, and it unravels to the point where we figure out that it's probably partially to do with a lack of community and being connected with other people, a GP will refer you to a social prescriber, who is somebody who is in contact with lots of different areas in the community. So we're talking about allotments and gardening clubs and all sorts of other things. And they will put the individual, according to what they would like to do, they'll put them in touch with a community or club or society, which means that they can start to build some of those human connections that we realise, and we're realising we actually need to be healthy and well. And the final thing there is stress reduction. So the general trend at the moment is that we are quite stressed generally, and we may not feel stressed because we have a fantastic coping mechanism and we adapt very, very well to stress. But over the long term, we are finding that people are starting to suffer more and more with chronic stress, and that has a major impact on our health long term, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through today. So those are the 5 areas of lifestyle medicine. These are the things that we focus on when we talk to people about their health. And the good news about all of these things is that these are things that we can do. So they are things that we can have an effect on and change. Okay. So I thought I'd throw this in because it's obviously very pertinent to the group that I'm talking to tonight. And I thought it would be interesting to look at what the differences are between veteran health, so people who've served, and civilians. So how do we fare as veterans in comparison to our civvy counterparts? And you can see here, this is from an annual population survey that was published a couple of years ago. And what it did was ask lots and lots of questions to veterans and compared them with non-veterans to see if there were differences in terms of general health, in terms of lots of lifestyle things. So whether people smoked, how much they drank, what medical conditions they suffered with. And these are the results here, or at least some of them. And what I'm going to do is actually, you can read a lot of these for yourself, but I will summarise to say that in the round, we are pretty much exactly the same as the general population. And that's possibly upsetting to some of us. We like to think we are robust, well-trained individuals who've gone through military training, and therefore we are beacons of health. And some of us may be, but in the round, when we look at all the different age groups, and this is going, you can see the age groups we're looking at is 16 to 64 and 65 plus. So we're going across all ages of veterans. We're pretty much the same as our civilian counterparts. The major difference that you can see on the bottom left here, is that veterans are much more likely to smoke. That's about it. And that's across all age groups. You can see quite a significant difference there between the age groups, 49 and 36%, for example. So 49% of 18 to 34-year-olds who are veterans are likely to have smoked, compared to 36%. Women are more likely, so female veterans are significantly more likely than female non-veterans to have smoked. And the same with male veterans as well. So we know that smoking is one of the only significant differences. And veterans tend to have smoked or are currently smoking more than our civilian counterparts. In terms of the medical conditions that we suffer with, you see on the top right there, they're pretty much the same as our civilian counterparts. Heart, blood pressure, circulatory conditions, we all get them the same as our non-veteran friends and family. And on the bottom there, again, pretty much no differences between us and the overall population. The only difference we could see was that there was slightly increased chance, and I say slightly, I actually mean significantly, as you can see from there, 35 to 49-year-olds with essentially musculoskeletal issues, which you might think is fairly understandable. I didn't see a breakdown as to how many Air Force people this affected, but my inkling would be that this may be more pertinent to our Army colleagues than to us. And I'm not saying anything about RAF culture, but I think it was a little bit less physical than Army culture. So there you go. As a general overview of this whole slide, though, we're saying that our behaviours, our health are essentially the same as the civilians that we live and work with. So how is the general populace behaving? How are we doing as a general population? I'm going to summarise this to say not very well in terms of lifestyle. So I've just picked out a few interesting things that you can see from this report. You can see, so on the top left there, looking at how our food purchasing has changed in the last few years. And you can see the things that we are eating less of, so consuming less of or purchasing less of. So you can see sugar, preserves has gone down massively, about 8% since 2014. Everybody still eats potatoes in the same way as they used to. And then you can see the things we're buying more of. And I'd love to see a COVID report on the alcoholic drink side of things, because we know that people are drinking a lot more or have been in the last year. So alcoholic drinks have gone up, so that looks about 7.5%, doesn't it? Cakes, buns and pastries, that's gone up about 8%. And right at the top there, we are buying and therefore presumably consuming a lot more cheese. That's probably wonderful in moderation, but not if we're eating too much of it. So it's very interesting to see how things change. And while we may be buying less sugar and preserves, we're buying a lot more confectionery, so ready-made stuff. So it kind of balances out, and not necessarily in a good way. Now, on the bottom left here, we've got looking at how many fruits and vegetables, portions, that people are eating a day. And you can see the coding up there at the top, or the key at the top, showing the dark blue is people who are eating 5 or more. As we know, the recommendation, daily recommendation is 5 or more portions of fruit and vegetable. And the best we're getting is the 35 to 44 age group there, which is roughly, I'd say, about 25% of people, which is actually pretty good. But you see the dark blue bars are quite possibly smaller, quite a lot smaller than the light grey, which is less than 3 servings of fruit and vegetable a day. And there are some pretty startling things here where some people are eating absolutely no fruits and vegetables a day at all. So we're not doing particularly well at that. And you may find that, and we can see that this sort of behaviour pattern is probably having an impact on the chart on the right hand side, which is looking at, and if you want to, this is just England, I'm afraid. I haven't included stats for Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland. I'm not going to draw any stereotypes there at all, but in England itself, so you can see the average about over 60% of the population in England are classed as overweight or obese. So that's a BMI of over 25 or higher. And you can see that we go from London is the trimmer region of all of them, although still not particularly trim, and the North East and West Midlands are tying for who can eat the most pies, and that's, yeah, we're looking at about 70% there of people who are obese or overweight, which is pretty significant. And the reason it's significant, and this isn't about living a life of virtue or being perfect or anything else, is that we are directly attributing many of these behaviours to a future that involves chronic health conditions. And certainly from my own work as a doctor in A&E and elsewhere, people with chronic health conditions do not live a great quality of life. We have some medications that allow people to live for a long time, and they will help to a certain extent, but generally people who are developing chronic health conditions do not feel well. And that's what we're hoping to help people to try and avoid. So we know that behaviour is not as ideal as we'd like it to be in terms of what we're choosing to eat. And we know that people are overweight. We also know that the sedentary lifestyle is a big factor in this. So people not engaging in physical activity as much as recommended. But we also know that underpinning a lot of these behaviours is stress. And as I mentioned earlier, chronic stress is a problem. We know that people are highly stimulated, and stress doesn't mean necessarily just feeling stressed, hair on fire and flapping about, struggling to cope with things. It's actually just the resources we're using in our body to cope with a huge amount of things that we are doing. And that includes things like being highly stimulated as we're driving down the motorway at 70 miles an hour, or whatever speed we drive down the motorway at. And stacking that on top of reading the news, watching the news, being constantly connected to a globe now that we didn't have before, and being stimulated by all of the things that we get from that information, from being on screens that give us this blue light that wakes us up, to juggling work and home life in a way that wasn't the way that things were. And so we know that lots of people are struggling with chronic stress. What lots of people don't know is that stress is not something we're designed to deal with over a long period of time. We are designed to deal with stress in very acute episodes. That's what our primal stress response is there for. So when we are dealing with chronic stress, we know that it actually has some pretty significant physiological effects. So that's effects on the body and also on the brain. So most people, when they talk about stress, will think of it as very much a condition of the mind. And they'll say, oh, I'm tired, I've had enough, I need signing off, doc. That's the kind of general gist of it. And we know that there are definitely physiological, mental effects as a result of chronic stress. And I'm not going to go around and explain all of these because I am going to run out of time if I do that. But the mental effects of stress, if we're not doing as well as we feel we should, if we've got too many plates spinning, and we don't have a capacity to deal with all of them, it's clear that our self-esteem will likely suffer. We are likely to withdraw from what's going on around us because we don't want to present ourselves when we're less than our best. And we may develop conditions such as anxiety or depression, and we may feel that we have a sense of brain fog. So brain fog is actually a physiological response. It's not just not thinking clearly. It's not something you can smack yourself on the head for and say, come on, get a grip of yourself. It's as a result of us diverting our resources away from an area of our brain called the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is there to help us make decisions and plan ahead, and helps us to have a working memory, so to remember things. So if suddenly you find that you're struggling to think clearly, struggling to make decisions, or just feeling like it's hard work to get your brain firing, it's possible that your brain has adapted to being under chronic stress and has diverted its resources to your primal brain to help you deal with what it sees or perceives to be an immediate threat, which is what stress is. So brain fog is a real thing. It's not just a kind of sitting in a cloud and not being competent. It is a thing that happens to us, and it occurs through chronic stress. And all of this, of course, will have an impact on our mood as well. So the other side of this picture is not just the mental impact of chronic stress. There is also a physical impact of chronic stress. And some things you might think are obvious and you might have heard of, such as heartburn. Lots of people, and hopefully if you've been to the docs and said, I've got heartburn, or I'm getting this horrible burning sensation in my throat, they will have asked you the question, are you stressed? Are you going through a lot? Because we know that there is a link between those. But there is also a link between stress and all sorts of other physical conditions. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these because we would definitely run out of time, but there are a few that I will hover on because I find them interesting, and I know that they focus the mind, shall we say, for those who might be listening. So we know lots of people struggle with high blood pressure. That can be as a result and certainly contributed to by poor sleep and by chronic stress. Blood sugar dysregulation is when your blood sugar goes out of whack, and that can be through a variety of things. It can certainly be through stress, and what it means and the impact of that is not just that you get this blood sugar dysregulation, but that can develop into diabetes, and it can also predispose you to cancer as well. So not a good thing at all. Heartburn we touched on, and IBS is a little bit related to that. So it's the kind of hyperactivation of the stomach as a result of stress, which is where you get this cycle of constipation and diarrhea and bloating and pain and things like that, is often exacerbated by stress. Heart disease, we know, is also related to stress, and it also relates to diet. And the reason often that people eat more or poorly, or make choices to eat high fat or high sugar foods, is because they are stressed. And that again is a bit of a physiological survival response, and it happens. So we're more likely to get heart disease if we're stressed. The other things that might not be quite so obvious, and I don't know if any of you have been hovering over this and looking at it in dismay, but stress has a big impact, and lifestyle as a general rule has a big impact on erectile function. And I like to talk about this. I know the demographic likely tonight will be mainly male, so I think it's an important topic to talk about, because most of you chaps are super embarrassed and won't talk about it. But this affects a large number of guys, and we're talking about 40% of men in their 40s struggle with erectile dysfunction, 50% of men in their 50s, 60% of men in their 60s, and so on. And the reason that this has a link to our lifestyle and to how much stress we undergo is because in order to achieve an erection, you need to have a good blood supply. And in order to have a good blood supply, you need to have a really well-working vascular system. So that's the arteries that carry the blood to where it needs to be. And if you are under a lot of stress, you are likely to have damaged your vascular system. And that is also to do with what you're eating, is to do with whether you're smoking or not, is a massive one for erectile dysfunction. And it's to do with how much stress and what your blood pressure is like on a regular basis. So if you are somebody who struggles with erectile dysfunctions, and I won't ask anyone to raise their hand if they are, then it's certainly worthwhile not just going for the pill, the Viagra or whatever else, but actually looking to address some of the underlying issues, and often they are lifestyle orientated. So think on that one. The other two that I will cover, I said I wasn't going to cover anything, I basically have, I can't help myself. The other two that I should draw your attention to, so talking about low sex drive and infertility with stress, is that when we are stressed, we have a higher cortisol demand, which is one of our stress hormones. And cortisol is kind of higher up on our priority list in terms of when we produce our hormones. Cortisol is pretty much our #1 hormone that we want to produce, because it's the thing that is supposed to keep us alive. So what that means is that the hormones that are lower down the priority list don't get a look in. They will still be produced to a certain extent, but the ones that are right on the end, and that includes our reproductive hormones, don't get produced in the same quantities as they would if you were not stressed. And you may know people who've struggled to conceive and tried for a long time, and then got very stressed about it, got very upset about it all, and then given up. And then as soon as they've given up, they get pregnant. And that is often, and we see the link there in terms of how much our stress feeds into our ability to reproduce. And of course, there's a survival thing there as well when you think about it, in terms of if we feel that we are under stress, or we're in a environment in which we perceive threat, then it makes sense to not reproduce small, vulnerable humans, because it's unlikely in that stress situation or threat situation that they will survive. So we're not minded to either have sex or to conceive. And that's to do with hormones and our drive to produce a stress hormone over our reproductive hormones first. Okay, so as you can see, looking at all of those things, it's a bit of a smorgasbord of things that can be affected by stress. So we've talked about diet, we talked about how poor many of our choices are, we talked about weight and the fact that many of us are overweight, we talked about stress and all of the impact that has in various body systems. So I thought we could round this section off by talking about death, just to cheer us all up a little bit more. So let's talk about that. Here we go. So here are some absolutely, I find them pretty fascinating. Most of the people I've shown them to find them also pretty fascinating. And you can see here, these are tables of mortality data. So this is what causes people to die by age group and by sex. So on the top table, this is the causes of the 5 leading causes of death for men. And on the bottom, you've got the leading causes of death for women. And you can see they are ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and they're also color coded. So you will see the color coding there is, you've got light blue for external causes, you've got orange for cancers, you've got red for circulatory, so that's to do with the heart and the vascular system. Purple is respiratory, and green is anything else. So we're talking about liver, kidneys, brain, that sort of thing. So you can see the thing that I like to pay attention and to draw your attention to is the #1 leading cause of death in men from the age of 5 to 49, and also women 5 to 34 is suicide. And I know there's a lot of talk about mental health, and it's okay to not be okay, and there's a lot of those sorts of campaigns going round, but it's not just talk, it's not just snowflakery. This is actually quite a big problem, and we know that that mental health is a big problem, and there's lots of research going into why that is, and why we have rising levels of mental health problems coming from childhood as well. And I'll say, from just a very anecdotal perspective, working in A&E for the last year, the #1 thing that I've seen in the last year is COVID, as you might expect. The #2 thing that I've seen is people who have attempted to take their own life. And when I say people, I'm talking about kids as well, and we're talking 11, 12, 13-year-olds, that kind of age group, which is pretty shocking to see. And we're starting to ask the questions, or not starting, it's certainly been going on for the last few years, of why is this happening? Why is mental health so difficult. And we know that part of it is to do with our connection with other people, with the fact that we are online a lot, and it doesn't necessarily give us the connection, the real connection that we look for, the face-to-face connection. And you know, also to do with expectation, with globalization, of seeing, you know, the perfect life that people portray on social media, which we know isn't true, but we want to try and live up to that, amongst many other things. And there's also, we're starting to understand that our diet and lifestyle, lack of physical activity, are having a significant effect on mental health as well. Other things I like to draw attention to, so you can see cirrhosis and other liver disease. It's the green bit there on the age of 20 to 34, on both men and women. And the cause of that is mainly drinking alcohol. And I'm sure we've all had experiences of being that age, particularly in the military, where there was a huge amount of drinking. Certainly was when I was in. I'm sure it was the same for you as well. And you know, alcohol, very cheap, great to get hold of, but not particularly great for the liver, and increasingly worse for the liver the more you do it, as you can see from the way it's creeping up there, as you know, from the 5th, 4th, and then 3rd leading cause of death in men. The other reason that people are starting to get liver disease as well is not just alcohol, but it's something that we call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and that is much to do with what we call abdominal obesity, so fat around the organs, and that is also to do with what we're eating, unfortunately. Other things you can see there, so you can see the cancers. The cancers are predominant everywhere, but lung cancer is a big killer in the older age groups, and we also see dementia, and we are expecting over time that dementia to creep up, and I'll explain a little bit more why we are expecting that to see that as well. So the research is telling us that deaths as a result of lifestyle related diseases, so this means deaths that aren't caused by things like infections, so you know, pneumonia or flu and things like that that would traditionally kill us. Death as a result of lifestyle related diseases, so a lot of the things that you can see here, so you can see heart disease and stroke and cirrhosis, and some of the cancers are lifestyle related as well, has gone up from 31% in 1990 to 68% in 2016. I think the most recent figure, although I haven't got something to back that up, so I haven't put it on, is 70% now, and we are expecting that to keep going. So lifestyle related diseases, those are things that we can do something about to a certain extent, which is why we want people to pay attention, because it is never too late if you're not living a virtuous life, or at least living a semi-virtuous life, that you can do something about it. So lots of people talk about this. I think everyone has an inkling that, you know, heart disease, diabetes, having high cholesterol, obviously sometimes there is a genetic element in all of these things, but we also know that our lifestyle has an impact on this. But lots of people I speak to don't necessarily link lifestyle to cancer or dementia, because we talk about those as they're just freak things that happen to us, or they're things that run in the family, and so therefore that's just going to happen. It's not to do with lifestyle. But I like to talk about these because they are very much growing in terms of how many people are impacted by them, and they're also very much feared. Lots of people are very afraid of getting cancer, and they are very afraid of developing dementia. And if you have a loved one who has dementia, then you will know that it's not a particularly nice thing to see, and I'm sure it isn't nice for the person who's going through it to find that they're forgetting things and gradually losing function to the point where they do not know who they are. And so I wanted to talk about these just briefly, and the tagline there at the top: dementia is primarily a lifestyle disease. So this is something that people don't necessarily believe, but we have a large number of cases worldwide, and we're expecting that number to grow massively, as you can see there. Some of this will be to do with aging, the fact that we are allowed to, that sounded a bit grim, didn't it? That we stay alive longer, and we are kept alive. because of our quality of life and everything else, but it's also to do with lifestyle. And we know that there are some significant risk factors. We know that the older you get, the higher your risk. We know that there are a couple of genes at least that have an impact and will increase your risk or vulnerability to developing dementia. But most incidences of dementia are not inherited. So they're not down to your genes. Most incidences of dementia are down to lifestyle. And we talked about some of the lifestyle stuff on the previous slides about what happens with chronic stress and how we're eating and living and maybe not being as active as is recommended. And look at the risk factors for dementia there: high blood pressure, smoking, being overweight, obese, diabetes, and high cholesterol. We can do something about pretty much all of those. And that's what I want to kind of make clear, that we're not sitting ducks for these things. We can actually do something about them if we choose to. And that we, there's lots of research, people talking about taking omega-3 and things like that. The jury's actually out on that in terms of preventing dementia. But what we do know is that how you can minimize the risk is following a healthy lifestyle and doing things that stimulate your brain in a good way. And that means physical activity, because that stimulates and gets a good blood supply. It means connecting with other people, and it means using your brain. So doing crosswords and puzzles and all that kind of thing, keep using it, because that will build up what we call a cognitive reserve, which will protect you even as your brain starts to decline naturally with age. So engaging in puzzles and attending really interesting lectures, etc., would be very, very useful. And the key is to do those long term and regularly, so to make them part of your life. Cancer, again, people seem to think that they are a sitting duck for cancer, and in some ways you get unlucky. You can get unlucky with cancer, and you see it in children and things like that. So there are definitely elements in cancer that we can't do anything about, that we can't control. But around 1 in 3 cancers are preventable. So a third of all cancers are preventable, which I think is pretty significant. The reason they're preventable is because there are things we can do with our lifestyle that have an impact on how likely we are to get cancer. And you can see there, the consumption of red meat is, so red meat is what we call a group 2 carcinogen, which means it's probably linked to cancer. But processed meat is a group 1 carcinogen, which means that it is linked to cancer. So the guidelines at the moment are to not eat more than 700 grams of red meat a week, because it is linked to an increased risk of bowel cancer. And for every 50 grams, you can see it on there, for every 50 grams of processed meat that you eat, you increase your risk by 1.18. If that's every 50 grams, and when I say processed meat, I'm talking about ham, bacon, salami, lots of things that people love, unfortunately. So our consumption of meat has an impact. Other things, smoking, hopefully this should be an obvious one, but this is definitely a pertinent one when we talk about that one of the first slides we looked at, where we talked about what happens with veterans and smoking. We know that the veteran population smokes more. So half of all cases of preventable cancer are to do with smoking. And obviously we're talking about lung cancer in the main with that. This is the bad news, the very bad news, probably for the people who are drinking the wine every night. It increases your risk of 8 types of cancer, and your risk goes up with every drink you have. It's not just if you stick within your limits of 14 units a week, it's every time you have a drink, you increase the risk. Being overweight, I know there's lots of stuff out there about not being fattest and everything else, and it is actually scientifically evidence-based when we say that being overweight does impact your health, because we see obesity has an inflammatory effect, which means that you are at an increased risk for 13 types of cancer, and these are significant increased risks. So it is a significant link. You can be fat and fit all you like, but there is still a risk, and I can say that as somebody who was also fat and fit in my time. but you know, obesity has a significant impact on your health long term, and not just with cancer, but with arthritis and all sorts of other conditions. So how do you reduce your risk with cancer? I mean, I'm starting to sound like a broken record, aren't I? Because it's the same recommendation every single time. It's following a healthy diet, it's exercising regularly, it's maintaining a healthy weight. So getting yourself into that, you know, 30 or 40% of people who are actually a healthy weight in the population, stopping smoking, and something that's not usually a problem for us over here, certainly hasn't been for this last year, is just limiting UV exposure, because skin cancer, 95% of skin cancers are to do with sun exposure, UV exposure. That's probably not something many of us need to worry about. Okay, so that brings us back to this slide here. I have talked an awful lot about lifestyle, about things that we do day in, day out, the behaviours that we are following every day, just as a matter of course, generally without thinking a lot of the time. And I hope from what you've seen so far that you can see that a lot of what we do has an impact on our health in the future. And some of you may be getting to an age where you're more worried about your health now that you've retired, for example, or whatever. You may be thinking, I need to look after myself better. And there may be areas of this that you're looking at and thinking, I could do with fixing that or doing something to help with it. And that's the first step. You know, just realizing that we can do something about it, and then identifying what that is very, very helpful. But it's the next stage which is possibly the most challenging. And that is how we change those behaviours, because we are very, very much hardwired, often with what we eat in particular, because we run on habits. And I'll explain that in a little on the next slide. And actually, it has been shown that our behaviour has the biggest impact on health. And so if you're looking to change it, you're going to have to go through possibly a bit of a tough process to help yourself. And the reason it's tough is because we are governed largely as a result of habits. As you can see there, habits form about 45% of our behaviours. And that means that we are on autopilot, essentially, for half of the time. And I'll give you an example of, I don't know how many of you, not many of us will have been commuting to and from places recently, but you've got in a car from somewhere, driven to somewhere that you're used to driving, get out the car and you have no idea how you've got there, because you've completely switched off and gone into a habit mode of driving, because it's a completely habitual action and behaviour. Or going to the supermarket, for example, you will probably find if you were to track your path around a supermarket multiple times, you'd see you pretty much went the same way, picked up the same stuff every single time. Just as you would get out of the bed, probably on the same side, you would dictate which order you brush your teeth, go to the loo, whatever you do in the morning, is very much governed by habits. And the reason we have habits is to make us really efficient, so that we don't have to burn energy or thinking power on figuring out how to do things. So the more we do something, the deeper we get into a neural circuit in our brains, which means that we get a trigger, such as the alarm going off, for example, when we wake up in the morning. That signals us to get out of bed, to swing your left leg over, for example, get out on the right side of the bed, stand up, have a stretch, and then go to the bathroom. And that will be a completely thoughtless process. You don't have to do anything other than, unless you're super tired and having to will yourself to get out of bed. But we have these habit loops, and they're designed to help us get through things. But unfortunately, we also develop habits that don't do us any good. And part of it will be, for example, we will have figured out that if you feel down about something, you may have found that there's something you do that makes you feel better. And in lots of people's cases, it's usually eating some junk food of some description, because it makes us feel good and it gives us a dopamine hit. And dopamine is something that we seek all the time. We are essentially dopamine hunters. So once we get this trigger, so we feel down, we've got into a habit potentially of grabbing a packet of crisps, whatever. We eat it, it makes us feel good because we get a dopamine hit. Thank you, we've reinforced that habit once again. And what's difficult is when you're in these habit loops, you are not conscious of them happening. You won't even realise you've had a trigger. You won't have realised that you've done your normal thing of grabbing your packet of crisps. And the key to sort of breaking this down is disrupting these triggers, the kind of trigger and the action point. So disrupting that and saying, why is that happening? What can I replace that with? That's when you have to, if you know that you've got bad habits and you want to change them, that's when you have to sit down and go through those habits, maybe pick one and figure out, how am I going to break this? What can I replace this thing that I like eating or doing with for something that I know will be more helpful? So I've talked to a lady recently who wanted to change her habit of eating some biscuits when she got home from work because she was knackered and just always went for a snack. And we figured out the other thing that she really liked doing was having a bit of a boogie with her daughter. And so her plan and what she did was interrupt that action, so the trigger and action bit of that habit loop. It's okay, when I get home, I'm going to make it a thing that I have a boogie with my daughter and that will make me feel good and pep me up a bit. And that was a kind of conscious thing that you have to keep doing again and again and again, just as you did the previous thing, to build that into your new habits and behaviours to help you change. Okay. There we go, Aristotle bestowing us with his wisdom, which is still very relevant. We are what we repeatedly do. So what gets in the way? We've talked about habits. Sometimes expectations get in the way of our ability to change. So you may think, and this is going to be sexist here, yeah, I'll do it. This is a bit of a blokey thing where you'll say, right, I'm going to get from A to B, I'm going to lose 3 stone, I'm going to lose 2 pounds a week, and I'll have achieved that in however many weeks. And that's the expectation. And the reality is that with lifestyle change in particular, we don't go in a straight line because real life happens around us and we get thrown off track by our habits and things that we don't even think about. So the reality is that it's a jaggedy line of progress. It isn't a straight line. So, and part of what throws us off is when we don't meet that expectation, we throw in the towel and just say, oh, sod it, I'm not doing this, so I'll just go and have a Domino's because that'll make me feel better. So it's about getting your expectations right and being realistic. The other thing is understanding what's motivating you to change. And some of that, and maybe this is more relevant to perhaps some younger people, in terms of younger people tend to be more motivated by what other people think of them, as opposed to older people who will start thinking a bit more personally about what's good for them. So understanding your motivation, because motivation that comes from you is going to drive you more than motivation that comes from someone else, or the fear of something, or whatever it is. So understanding motivation and finding something within yourself that it makes sense to do. Habits, as we said, have a big impact. And your physiology, which we talked about, stress having an impact on how much you want to eat, and stress having an impact on how physical you want to be and everything else. But a lot of this can be overridden by actually planning what you're going to do. So if you want to make a lifestyle change, planning so that you can overcome those hurdles and make sure that you don't get sidetracked by some kind of trigger, auto response, and so that you don't have feeling tired getting in the way of doing something new, will have a big impact on how well you can make a change. So how do we change? We've seen that there are 3 things that cause long-term change. The first, which doesn't happen very often, is that somebody has an epiphany of some description. And that is often something like having a heart attack themselves, and that suddenly gives them a kick to say you need to do something about this. Or it is something like a loved one having a stroke, or something that puts life into a new perspective. And that's usually, you know, a very, very significant event. Doesn't happen to many people, but that is one way that kicks you into a whole new track of what you want to do in your life. So that's a good thing. The other thing that you can do to make long-term change is just start with something really, really small. So we're often victims of over-ambition when it comes to trying to change something, and we try to bite off more than we can chew and be unrealistic. And we see this in New Year's resolutions all the time. Of, you know, I'm gonna go to the gym and I'll be running a marathon in 3 months' time because I'm going to stick to running, even though I've never ever done that in my life before. And actually, we're crap at that. We're not good at making big changes unless we have this epiphany, for example. But the key to making long-term sustainable change is just keeping things really, really small. So if you know you don't exercise enough, instead of saying, right, the recommendation is I exercise 5 times a week, that's what I'm going to do from next week, just start with once a week, and build that in until you're comfortable, and then build it up to 2 times a week. So starting small is key, because otherwise you will burn out of willpower to keep doing it. And the final thing is to change your environment. So I'm sure you've heard the whole thing of you are the product of the 5 people closest to you, or the average of the 5 people close to you. Often we get people around us who aren't particularly supportive, or we are in an environment that isn't particularly helpful. So if you have lots of friends who smoke, or lots of friends who drink, then you're less likely to be able to stop drinking or stop smoking. So changing that up so that you are within a supported environment can make a big difference in terms of how well you can cope with making long-term change. And here we go. This is a slide I nicked it from John, I'll be honest, which I think is really key. And this is about the compound effect, and it's talking about consistency in making change. And essentially, if you can do a small thing regularly and you can keep building on it, then over time, you will be able to make a massive difference. Likewise, if you do a small thing that is not good for you over a period of time, you will eventually, and I don't mean this as a slap around the face, but you will eventually fall off the health cliff. And you see that, we are fantastic. Our bodies are fantastic at compensating for our poor choices throughout our life. And then as we get older, we have this kind of compound effect of our behavior. And we start to develop lots of things as a result, lots of poor health outcomes as a result of it. But you can flip this the other way and choose to do things that are positive. And over time, you will find that they will have a significant impact on your health long term. So starting small, if you don't have the opportunity to have an epiphany or to change your wife or your husband or whoever it is that isn't particularly supportive, but doing some small changes over long periods of time consistently will make a difference, and they will build your habits such that you will then be able to make major changes. So that concludes all of the education and information that I've just machine gunned at you. And so I guess I could just leave you with this final question, thinking about everything that we've talked about this evening, which is, what do you need to do differently? Is there something, when you look at all of those areas that we talked about, is there something you're thinking, I know I've been meaning to do this for a long time. Is this the time to do it? Can I do something about it? Don't wait until next January to do something about it. Think about, is there something I can do now? Because we know long term, the more you can do to help yourself, the better you will feel long term. And that's got to be worth it. So there we go. That concludes my bit. I've managed to just about squeeze that into an hour. John, impressed?
No, very well done. God, that surprised me. You finished in an hour. Well done, girl. No, fantastic. I told you she was interesting, and at other times when I've heard her, she covers all the physiology words and the science and the hormones and everything, because we're not trying to blame character here. She's very much saying it's much of it, we're driven by our physiology and the science behind it. And certainly the lifestyle medicine is a growing trend in medicine. And we have got, I'll read a number of the questions, so thanks for those. Let me go down, some of which you have answered, but I will read them out anyway from the top. And please, anybody else has some questions, please to throw them out here. So we've got, how does fitness and exercise play into our longer term healthy living? Is it essential to be active most days?
Yes is the short answer. In terms of, it depends what you mean by active, but it's important that we move every day. The government guidelines look at 30 minutes 5 times a day, 5 times a week. But essentially, it's like anything. If you don't use it, you will lose it. And you have to a certain extent, as you get older, you have to make sure that you use it. Because your muscle mass and everything will decrease more as you get older. So it's actually more important as you get older to help your heart, to help your circulatory system, but also to help your skeleton, to make sure you're weight bearing, and to make sure that you stay, you can stay steady, and that you have your core muscles and everything working well, because falling is an increasing risk of older age. And you don't want to, we know that people who fall and have hip fractures are highly likely to die, for example, within the next year. So it's the kind of thing, if you can stay physically active, keep yourself working, keep your muscles toned and there, as opposed to melted away with age, then it's definitely going to be a benefit. But yeah, moving every day is important, but being active and actually getting your heart rate up, walking at an increased pace, for example, or whatever physical activity you do is important too, on 5 days at least.
No pressure here, because we've got a fellow GP asking this. If I could tell my patients, yes, you see, danger, you never know who's online. You see, you go, oh, bugger. Right, if I could tell my patients to change one thing about their lifestyle, what should it be?
That's a really, really interesting question. I'll obviously say it because you're a fellow doctor, so I'll be good about it. But I would say the thing that people struggle with and they don't understand is a major issue in terms of lifestyle is sleep. Sleep underpins pretty much every other lifestyle change. So if you talk to them about sleep and you find that it's not as good as it could be, that is the best thing that they can change. Because if they can get good quality sleep, then they will have the energy, the willpower, everything else to change some of the more superficial things like what they're eating and how much activity they're doing. So yeah, I would say sleep is your starting point.
Okay. Do you think the book Oxygen Advantage about nasal breathing, don't we all just do that? I don't know what that is. Okay, about nasal breathing is useful to incorporate. Do you see any evidence for this to be beneficial? What's nasal breathing? Isn't that what we do every day?
No, lots of people do mouth breathing. They'll breathe through their mouth, but I don't know the book, to be honest. But I would say that there's lots of talk about how well we breathe, having an impact on particularly our stress levels, and the fact that if you can slow down your breathing and oxygenate yourself properly, then you will have a better sort of what we call our parasympathetic nervous system action, which is our rest and digest, so kind of reducing stress. So that would be my take on it, but I can't give you a specific answer about the Oxygen Advantage book because I haven't read it.
Okay, a couple which I'm going to read 2 questions because they're all in the same space. What are the factors that explain why out of a small group of squaddies, for example, in exactly the same high stress live combat situations, some suffer with PTSD and others seem to show no symptoms at all? Or the second question is, any thoughts apart from clinical intervention on how people who've experienced adverse childhood experiences or exposure to trauma, PTSD, etc., can break the cycle? So, I mean, those are huge subjects, but
yeah, they are. I don't think there's any. I can't give you a specific answer for why some people develop PTSD. Some of it will be coping mechanisms. Some of it will be triggers. Some of it will be childhood conditioning and things like that will have an impact on whether somebody develops PTSD, because much of what we experience is what we perceive. So we may be in the same situation, but we may perceive it slightly differently based on how we are getting that input in and how we process it. So the same experience will feel different for everyone. But in terms of the clinical intervention side of things, I don't think there is anything that we could do that isn't a clinical intervention when it comes to breaking a cycle. I think anyone who has PTSD or adverse childhood experiences would benefit from therapy. I don't think there's we can't tell them to start deep breathing or eating a nice diet or whatever. I think all of these things help. We know that a good diet and physical activity and connection with other people has a positive impact on mental health. But I think if we're talking about a specific condition, PTSD or whatever, then we need to be using a clinical intervention to help with that.
I am an active 74-year-old, obviously looking quite good. No, I'm an active 74-year-old. This is someone else's question. I love skiing, but I really worry about my bone strength and injury. Am I silly to continue at my age?
Not if you love it. I don't think so. I mean, obviously you have to manage that risk, and the more you can do, if you can keep yourself, if you're not skiing all year, and you've got downtime when you're not skiing, then you need to make sure that you're keeping yourself conditioned, so that when you get back on the slopes, you're less likely to fall over and hurt something. We know as you get older that you are going to be more at risk of falling and injuring yourself. But that's something you've got to balance. I think if you enjoy it, if you're managing the risks, if you're staying conditioned out of your skiing activities as well, and you feel safe as you're doing it, then why not? Okay.
I have to read this because it's a lovely comment. Other than a recording of your excellent presentation, there we go. Is there a particular concise source of lifestyle medicine information you would recommend?
Good question. There is a society, the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, BSLM, which has a lot of resources on the site where they will talk about lifestyle medicine and what that means. I would probably point you in that direction if you wanted some concise information. There's also, it depends on what you're into. I'm just see if I've, excuse me while I duck off. I think I've got a book that's quite useful. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so there's a chap called Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. Can you see me on this? I can't see. Yeah. He's written a book called The 4-Pillar Plan, which is essentially based on lifestyle medicine. It talks about stress reduction, eating, moving, and sleeping, and so that's probably that would be quite a good source if you wanted to look at that as well.
Interesting question here. Is there such a thing as thriving on stress? People who enjoy stress must have presumably unknowingly devised coping strategies. Could others be trained to use these strategies and trained in resilience?
Ooh, good question. I think people do thrive on stress up to a certain point. I'm sure we've all been in situations where we felt alive on stress, and there is an exhilaration to it because you've got adrenaline going around and it feels good. Yes, people do thrive on that kind of activity. I wouldn't recommend it long term, but yes, a lot of it is also to do with coping strategies, and we talk about ways that we deal with stress, and the way that we deal with stress is to basically look at either emotion-focused coping or problem-focused coping. That's our kind of way of coping strategies. So emotional-focused coping is talking about what we do when we can't change the situation. So if we're in a position that we can't do anything about, so if we're stuck in a loveless marriage, let's say, and we don't feel like we can divorce because we haven't got any cash, then you have to find ways to cope with that level of stress, and that's emotion focused coping. So that's a lot of the lifestyle stuff that we talked about. So you will feel less stressed if you eat well, if you eat healthily, if you exercise, if you sleep well, if you have good connections, all of that stuff, you will feel better. And the other side of it is if you've got situations that you can make some changes on, if you're good at evaluating situations, you feel quite stressed, then it's a problem focused coping, which is sitting with the issue or the situation, breaking it down and figuring out what you can do to problem solve in terms of make that situation less stressful. So there are two main ways of coping, and the differences we see in people in how they manage stress is generally how good they are at coping, so their coping strategies. So if we're talking about training people in resilience and everything else, it's about teaching them to utilize those methods of coping. You know, shoring themselves up through emotional lifestyle type stuff, or breaking problems down and making them less stressful by optimizing. And you know, we talked about lean, the you know, lean process and things like that. So that's problem focused coping essentially. So a combination of both. If people seem to be the kind of people who are excellent at dealing with loads of stuff, generally they're really good at both of those things. So yeah, you can be trained in that. And it's
interesting here in terms of dementia risk factor, the percentage influence of genetics.
So I knew I was going to be asked that, and I knew I didn't know it off the top of my head, so I printed it out. So the genetics, so there's a couple of genes that affect dementia. If you have one copy of the gene, you have 11% chance of developing Alzheimer's dementia. If you have two copies, so this is at the age of 75, and I'll compare this to non-copies of the gene. So one copy of the gene is 11%, two copies of the gene is 18%. If you don't have that gene, your chances are 6%. So it does have definitely an influence, but even with those with two copies of a gene that we know is linked with Alzheimer's, it's an 18% risk at the age of 75.
So being a non-doctor, you're saying so 80% is lifestyle, really. It's not the lifestyle choices, because only 82%, you're saying 18% is genetics. Therefore,
Well,
are you inferring that 82% is lifestyle choices?
It's not, I don't think it's quite as straightforward as that. That's the risk
Okay.
as opposed to the risk, the you know, genetics, but just in a kind of in a base state, if we're talking about 6% just normally with no genes at all, you're talking about 18% with two copies, which is pretty unusual, and 11% with one copy. Yeah, it doubles your risk essentially. Okay. But lifestyle is a huge impact on all of that.
Okay, we've got a thank you very much for people putting the books in the chat. Please do have a look at that, and we'll make sure we post the Dr. Chatterjee's reference for everyone. Said, would you prescribe a lovely afternoon nap, Dr. Ruth?
Well, the only answer I can give this is yes, of course I would. Yeah, absolutely. As long as it doesn't take away from your nighttime sleeping. Some people overdo the nap in the afternoon and find that they don't sleep at nighttime, but as long as you are getting solid amount of sleep at nighttime, if you're feeling a little bit like you need a siesta, then go for it.
Does power nap work? Is that real, or is that just a trendy thing that people talk about when you say having a power nap?
That's a real thing.
Okay.
It's been shown to recharge us very well.
Now, I know you're going to like this next question because I know you like this one, but can mindfulness help with lifestyle and stress? Hell
yes. Yes, it can. Yeah. Mindfulness people think it's a bit of a, you know, it's a bit of a modern term, but essentially our lifestyle doesn't give us a break. It doesn't let us have quiet moments in the way that, because we're so connected all the time, we don't get time off from being stimulated or connected or whatever else, which would have happened naturally in our lives or the lives of our ancestors. So mindfulness is essentially proactively shoehorning time into our life where we can just chill out and just find a little bit of calm and peace. And I'm a massive fan of it. I use it if I've got a really, really busy head when I try and go to sleep often. And there's apps out there that will help you with learning to you know, practice mindfulness, and it's a form of meditation, but you don't have to be sitting on a yoga on a mountain top to be able to do it.
What's the app you use?
So the app I use is called Insight Timer.
Because you'll mean it's free.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, there's a couple of others that are really more well known. That's one's Headspace, which will teach you how to do it if you don't know how to, and the other one is Calm. But yeah, I use Insight Timer because I've done some of it before, so I'm a bit more practiced. But it's free, and there's loads of guided sort of meditations, and I do not survive a full guided meditation before I am conked out and asleep, and I sleep like a baby as a result of it. So yes, absolutely, mindfulness is really, really valuable with that.
Two last questions, because I'm very aware the questions are starting to come thick and fast as people coming in. So sorry to those I've been unable to ask you questions, but a lot of real interest. Interesting here. One said, in my opinion, diet advice is changing quite a lot. For example, the emphasis on getting a lot of carbs as the base of our diet pyramid, potato, cereal. Though I found when I've found recently that triangle that we all get taught is actually just almost a lobbying group. So you've got to have those percentages, and it worked out. So it's not real for either men nor women, but there we go. Is now looking very questionable, that pyramid. And there is an increasing emphasis on getting good, nutritionally dense food. Do you think people know enough about latest diet thinking?
Absolutely not. I think a lot of it is spun, unfortunately, and a lot of the sort of mainstream diet advice we get is rubbish and is out of date. It's also, for people who are trying to be on top of it, it's incredibly confusing because there is so much different advice everywhere. And so, no, I don't think people know enough about it. But the other side of it is I think some people obsess about it too much. And lots of people come to me, so I have a lifestyle medicine clinic, and they come to me and they talk about what is their optimum diet, and they want to know about what supplements they need, what macronutrient ratios they need, and all the rest of it. And they are acting as if they are elite athletes, and most of the time they're trying to run before they can walk. And the kind of really basic advice, which is really simple, is eat lots of fruits and vegetables, try and keep away from processed foods as much as possible, and drink lots of water. That is it. If you want to go paleo and do that, then do that. If you want to go carb heavy, carb free, if you want to do Atkins, whatever it is, people, there's evidence to support all of them or none of them. It's all conflicting. And actually, if we all did just some really basic stuff consistently, like eat lots of fruit and vegetables, and eat like you say, nutritionally dense food. So that's colourful food. Eat the rainbow, but not Skittles. But yeah, eat the rainbow. So eat lots of different coloured foods and get variety into your diet. You'll be in a much better position than trying to follow some doctrine that cuts out whole food groups or whatever else.
The last question, if I may, I'm just very aware of time. And I know the answer to this because I've heard this before from you, but I've taken up cold water swimming. So this is a proper hard school person here, fantastic. Yes. And swam through the winter. I sleep better, feel better, and have more energy. Don't I feel really inadequate now? Evidence regarding the positive effect on the immune system seems unclear. What are your views, please?
I don't know. I'm going to be honest. I actually don't know about the effect. I'm going to plump for the fact that it probably improves it because it will help indirectly through better sleep and having more energy and everything else. But I couldn't tell you what the evidence is. My kind of gut would tell me that it does help your immune system. But just as a general overview, it's a fantastic thing to do, and don't stop it. And who cares about the immune system? Just do what it's doing because it's helping you, and the immune system will generally look after itself. But essentially, if you're sleeping better and you're feeling better, your immune system will be better as a matter of course.
Well, Ruth, there we are. Thanks very much on behalf of everyone there. That was a quick hour and a quarter, wasn't it? Really interesting, and lots of comments coming through. And it's not about whether it's not to make people feel inadequate. It's more saying let's look at the science and play with the science and have some real answers. And that's what I value when I listen to Ruth. You're getting the real stuff here, not just woke comments. You know, it's based on science. And if nothing else, I suppose, is to say whenever she does this this talk, is try just one small change. If you go away with one small change from something, and that can, as I say, over time, create a huge difference. So thanks very much again, Ruth. Really excellent as usual. We'll try and pass on the extra bits of information. Great comments coming in, but it's for all of us. It behoves to all of us to take responsibility for ourselves and our lifestyles. So all it remains for me to do now is just introduce the final things from the club. So we've kindly, thanks to Matthew and Sophie who've been running this evening. And could you just put on the next, the closing slide, please, Matthew? So certainly when I was thinking about this evening is we hear, being an ex-pilot, we hear so many stories of flying, and whilst obviously the Air Force is all about air power and stuff like that, I think Ruth and just demonstrates the level of just character and skill and expertise that the Air Force offers beyond flying, actually. And certainly I'd be really keen if there's someone out there, whether you're admin, logistics, but all that talent that we so rarely hear from, of the stories of other people that make up our Air Force. So please do volunteer if you've got stories. However, our next couple, we've got Fighters in the Blood, we've got Black Robinson on the 9th of June. Please do, that's an online event. Please do sign up for that. And then we've got two offerings, really the same thing. We've got Will Airedale on the Pathfinders, really fascinating, obviously the elite force in the RAF, but we can offer you two. We've got the online version, and as you can see, and for those who've been on a number of our online events, they've gone down extremely well, and we're getting good numbers. So please, if you can't make it down to London, please do join us on the 22nd of July, 6:30 to 8:30. However, you know, the club, your club is open again. Please do come and join us. I'll certainly be going there very soon back, and join us for a lovely 2-course dinner in the club, and see friends and colleagues, and let's re-establish some of that community we're talking about. I'm very much, one of the comments I will say, this idea of community in the RAF club is so important. I'm a RAFA ambassador, and RAFA has the befriending initiative, because so many of our friends and colleagues are lonely. And in my investigations in looking into this, I didn't realize, do you know, we have a Minister of State for loneliness. The Joe Cox Commission, there are 9 million people in the UK that are meant to be lonely. And when a government, it was initiated by Theresa May in 2018, initiates a Minister of State for loneliness, this is not some fluffy modern, you know, with the woke generation. This is a fundamental issue we have in our modern society, and that's again why one of the pillars is community. We are all better together, and hell, we've got this wonderful club that you can all join and help and support each other. So please do return to the club, and we look forward to seeing you. And here we've got any donation to the club would be really appreciated. As I say, as you can imagine, we've gone through hard times, and it would be super that we can all support our club. So thanks very much to Sophie and Matthew for the technical support. Thank you once again, Ruth, superb as always. And I hope everyone's enjoyed, and please do just send any comments you have. We much gratefully received, and we look forward to seeing you back in the club. So thanks one and all, and I think that is about it. Good night.